CTV News at 5 with Hudson Mack.
Former Premier Bill Vander Zalm has been found guilty of defamation in a case brought by Victoria's Ted Hughes. Vander Zalm has been fined $60,000. The former Conflict of Interest Commissioner launched the civil action after reading a book that Vander Zalm had published in 2008. It claimed that Hughes was biased and politically partisan while leading the inquiry that ultimately forced Vander Zalm from the Premier's office. In 1991, Hughes found that Vander Zalm, who was then Premier, mixed his private and public affairs in the sale of his Fantasy Gardens theme park in Richmond. The preface of Vander Zalm's book suggested that Hughes spread lies behind a mask of integrity. Hughes says that he is satisfied with the decision that Vander Zalm has been ordered to pay $60,000 in damages. BC Ferries is going into the airline business to try to help clear up the backlog of passengers trying to make the crossing between the Comox Valley and Powell River. BC Ferries is temporarily offering flights after the Queen of Burnaby broke down, leaving hundreds of passengers waiting on the dock. The first flight will take off from Powell River tomorrow morning. There'll be room for 30 passengers on each flight, and priority will be given to people who are traveling under the BC Medical Travel Assistance Program. A return flight from Comox back to Powell River will be available for travelers later in the afternoon.
Customers traveling for medical purposes go on the BC government medical services TAPS program. So those customers, instead of using that voucher for ferry travel, they'll be using that for a flight. If there is any additional room on that flight, we would permit booking some other customers who are traveling for non-medical reasons, and they would pay the ferry fare.
Beginning Monday, BC Ferries is also adding a second ship on the Comox to Powell River run, and that will provide 2 additional round trips per day. BC Ferries hopes to have the Queen of Burnaby out of dry dock and all repaired and back in service by the end of next week. If you'd like to find out more about the flight reservations and the ferry and shuttle schedules, the toll-free number BC Ferries has set up is on your screen. It's 1-877-222-1949. Well, you may have one in your kitchen. More than 1.5 million of the Tassimo single-cup coffee makers sold in Canada and the U.S. are being recalled because you could get yourself badly burned. The recall involves the Tassimo brewers with the Bosch brand name and Tassimo professional brewers. There have been 140 reports of incidents where the brewers sprayed hot liquid, coffee grounds, or tea leaves onto the users, including 37 reports of second-degree burns. That's because these tea discs that hold the coffee or tea can gum up and burst. They've been recalled as well. If you have one of these machines, contact Tassimo or wherever you bought it to order a free replacement tea disc holder for the brewer. The number is 1-866-918-8763. Well, a long-standing Victoria motel that had seen better days is ready to undergo a $1 million transformation that will help people on the street with shelter from the storm. Today, Mayor Dean Fortin and the Victoria Kool-Aid Society announced renovations will begin as early as next week on the Queen's Manor Motel. That site was a former Travelers Inn purchased by the City of Victoria in July. The project will convert 36 units into studio suites to provide permanent housing for people who are currently living on the street.
Cities, provinces, municipalities, countries have really said, you know, we've tried to manage homelessness. How do we make sure that there's cots, emergency shelters? How do we make sure there's food banks? And those are important, but what we realized that just was managing homelessness, and really our commitment should be to ending homelessness. So really it was a turn that we made to say, it's tough, but we're going to invest in housing.
It's not just good enough to throw up 4 white walls around folks who have been marginalized for years and years and years. It's going to take time for these folks to get their lives back together. But we have the resources, we have the support people in place to do that.
The renovations will be completed floor by floor, and people already living there will be moved to shelters during construction. The project should be completed in about 7 months. People say they can't wait for their new homes.
I was homeless for 3 years, I believe, and now that I'm in there, just everything's going up, you know, like got steady housing, so it helps just with every day-to-day life, you know, not trying to find somewhere to stay the next night. Well, hopefully it means, this building per se is mostly people off the streets, right? So, yeah, like a warm place to sleep, shower, make your own food for one. So I think it'll make a huge difference, hopefully.
The project will cost about $1.5 million. All costs have been covered through funding from BC Housing, the Capital Regional District, the United Way, and the federal government's homelessness partnering strategy. Well, we invited you to talk about mental health, and talk you did. Our parent company, Bell, along with millions of Canadians, are hailing Let's Talk Day. Yesterday, a huge success. Olympic medalist Clara Hughes led the way in leading the discussion to erase the stigma surrounding mental illness. More than 78,000 long-distance calls, texts, and tweets were made by people all across the country. At 5 cents each, Bell donated nearly $4 million towards Canadian mental health programs. The national conversation sparked a 19% increase from last year's inaugural Let's Talk Day. Victoria Police asking for your help tonight as they try to find the vandals behind a hate crime, and as an incentive, a $5,000 reward has now been posted. More than 1,000 people gathered to protest the hate graffiti after 5 headstones at the Emmanuel Jewish Cemetery were vandalized with swastikas and racial remarks. And December 31st, people want whoever did the defacing of the stones to know they are not welcome and they will be caught. An anonymous, concerned individual has now posted the money to help find the vandals. Anyone who can provide information leading to an arrest of the person or people involved will get the $5,000 reward. If you have information, you're asked to contact Victoria Police at 250-995-7444. Well, the U.S. Coast Guard, meantime, is working more closely with the Royal Canadian Navy right now to better serve the West Coast. HMCS Saskatoon was taking part in Exercise Pacific Guardian today. More than 300 crew members were running drills and taking orders from the Canadian Naval Reserve Base on Deadman's Island in Stanley Park.
The idea right now is the RCMP has asked us to search for a vessel that they're interested in taking a look at and possibly boarding for illegal contraband. So we're helping them with the surveillance and the intelligence portion, giving them information about what's on the water. Right now, you probably can't see over the horizon there. We have sighted what we suspect to be the vessel of interest, so we are going to approach them and try to contact them on the radio to get confirmation that this is what, in fact, we're looking for.
A part of the training included a hoist exercise in which a U.S. Coast Guard helicopter flew over the ship to practice loading and unloading equipment. The crews also practiced what they do in the event of a casualty.
Well, first of all, the casualty is priority number one, and making sure that their comfort and their safety is the main priority. And then making sure that the pathways and any place that you have to move them to is clear of any personnel, making sure that they come in the house out of the weather elements and stuff like that. So there's a lot of responsibility of making sure that A, they're comfortable, A, that you're not injuring them anymore, and preserving life.
The cross-border training is intended to prepare sailors and U.S. Coast Guard crews for major international political events such as the APEC summit. RCMP in the Cowichan Valley are looking for the driver of a transport truck, a semi-trailer, who hit a pedestrian last night on the Trans-Canada Highway at about 8 o'clock. Police got a call that there was a man walking back and forth across the highway, and witnesses feared he could be hit by a vehicle. When the police arrived, they discovered that the man was in a ditch alongside the southbound lanes. Witnesses say that the man had been hit by a southbound semi that didn't stop after the accident. If you saw the collision or know who the truck driver may be, you're asked to contact North Cowichan Duncan RCMP. The victim, by the way, is expected to recover from his injuries. An RCMP officer in Nanaimo has been charged with assault. Constable Derek Brown is accused of using excessive force on a woman who was in police custody. The incident is alleged to have happened in August of last year. The commander of the RCMP detachment says another officer was in the process of fingerprinting the woman when Brown intervened, and his colleague felt the force he used was excessive. The officer complained to a superior, and the investigation was launched.
A 47-year-old female had been handled by the police. One of the officers dealing with that matter felt that another officer may have used inappropriate force. The nature of the assault is generally how the person was spoken to and how the person was handled. And that issue is before the courts.
The woman was not hurt in the incident, and she did not lodge a complaint. Constable Brown is now on administrative duty and has no contact with the public. He is facing an internal code of conduct investigation as well as the criminal charge due in court next month. Nearly 3,000 people had their power knocked out in Nanaimo today by a bird. BC Hydro says a seagull hit a hydro line on Skinner Street just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, and that knocked the power out to an entire neighborhood. It was restored within about an hour of the seagull strike.